Welcome back. It's Bill Brandmeier here, ready to play week with another guest, closing out our Thursday show with our spotlight on our local nonprofit that is on the front lines, impacting families, impacting our community in a big way, but also serving kids and with a huge heart and an incredible mission. I'm really excited to welcome Mary Esselman. And Mary is the executive director of Operation Breakthrough, which is one of the really gold standards of nonprofits here in Kansas City. The work that they do is unprecedented and the impact they have. Mary, welcome to Ready to Play Week. So glad
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, you and I have had a chance to meet, and I've done the tour, and I've gotten, obviously been a part of Operation Breakthrough and the ideas of what you're trying to get accomplished. But talk a little bit about your organization and how your team is poised to make an impact on families and on kids in Kansas City, and what that meant to you prior to this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been around for 49 years. It's pretty hard to believe, but really as an anchor in the community. And it started out as just, childcare, a place for parents to have their children while they're at work. And the two nuns that started it, they realized pretty quickly that care wasn't enough. If they really wanted kids to thrive, they needed to do more. And so we have a lot of wraparound social services as well as health services. We even have a children's mercy clinic on site. And I will tell you, over the last several months, that has been critical for us in terms of having a partner as we kind of have worked through COVID and the pandemic. But basically, we're the largest early learning center in the region. This fall, we'll have over 400 children, birth to 5. Big goal is to make sure children are ready. School readiness. We tend to send over 90% of kids ready, and that's compared to a national average of less than 50% for children in poverty. So that's a big goal, and we're looking at kids socially, emotionally, and making sure that they're hitting key developmental milestones. We also provide before and after care. A great way to think of that for kids who are in kindergarten through 8th grade is when school's out, we're in. And so you can imagine what that looked like this spring with schools all out and figuring out how are we going to support kids through their schooling.
That's exactly right. I talked to Mark Bedell earlier this summer, early this spring, right before the COVID shutdown. And I was worried about the last 2 weeks of summer, knowing that KCMO public schools were going to go back 2 weeks late. Normally they'd start in early August, and now they're starting August 24th. And I was concerned, 2 weeks. What are we going to do with our kids? They're going to be out on the streets, running around, going crazy. And come to find out that 2 weeks is not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with more like, 15 or 16 weeks and maybe even more. When COVID hit and when the pandemic, dictated that you had to operationally shift how you were serving. What was that like as a leader of an organization that is so closely tied to the front lines of poverty and this low-income low-income neighborhoods?
Well, for us, there's no question. We needed to be able to serve children. And so we started out with essential care. So we had 80 children whose parents were our parents who were involved in some capacity in healthcare. And so that's where we started. And I think it helped for us to kind of have that small group first, because there were so many changes. You started out with just hand washing and sanitizing, and before long we were screening and escorting children. Parents actually haven't been in our building since March. And then we went to masks. And a lot of these changes were like overnight. So imagine on a Friday finding out that on Monday everybody needed masks. And then in conjunction with that, just from a social services perspective, over the last 12 weeks, we've given out over 110,000 pounds of food, diapers, just toiletries, all of those things that families need. That are just basic items. I can remember the first few weeks when toilet paper, you couldn't find it. And so we finally put out a note that said, hey, when you're getting a package, if you could drop off a roll for us, that would be great for our families. And we would just put out bins, and people were so generous, dropping off kind of those core essentials. And then we started doing computers and refurbished computers and hotspots, because we had teachers and families who had no connectivity. And how are you going to go to remote learning at home or if our parents were in college and suddenly you have to be, having class remotely and you have no device and you have
Right.
no internet. So we worked to make sure every family was equipped as well as our staff, and then realized that's not how kids are going to thrive. They need to touch, they need to play, they need to feel things. So then we started matching developmental needs to learning kits and started delivering those. And we're still limited. I mean, we've gone from 80, now we're up to almost 400 children that we're serving, but we still have just as many at home. And
Right.
so we now are doing some learning on wheels for our rising kindergartners to make sure they're ready if they can't come back, because we're limited on group size, where we literally, our coaches or teachers go out, set up a card table, and they've got games and things that they're doing to get some of those critical kindergarten readiness skills. So a lot's been going on over the last months just to make sure we switch to telehealth. We have a full clinical staff for behavioral health, and that's been happening in terms of now doing those same things we were regularly doing, but now doing them through telehealth.
When I was on my tour, you guys happened to have some sort of lunch and learn, or some sort of group coming together in the downstairs beautiful cafeteria, and I was just amazed at how many high quality people you have on your team. It was really it was eye opening. So that must be a really nice to have a team of people that are nimble and able to make changes and make adjustments on the fly. I'm sure as a leader, you've had to lean on that team a lot for the last 3 months.
Oh, incredibly. And, we talk about it. We've got to all be as safe as we can to stay open, because, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg as we're figuring out kind of who gets to come back. Well, you can't get a job until you can get care, and you can't get care till you have a job if you're in order. And so that's been one of our biggest challenges is, making those opportunities for families to be able to come back safely. But
we bring up a good point. One episode and things kind of go in a different direction. So everyone needs to take responsibility and wear masks, and when they're off of work, make sure that they're doing the right things, because we're all in this together. And the target audience, the kids that you guys are serving, are so critical. It's so important that we fill that need. Isn't that right?
Well, we even, we say to our families, we're all in this together. Like even with the holiday weekend, I've sent out a note to families, I've sent out a note to staff just to say, we all want to celebrate and enjoy the holiday, but we also need to socially distance. We need to have our masks on. Reminder, let's not travel unless it's essential, because if you're at a hot spot, you have to self-quarantine. We're lucky to have Children's Mercy and the health department and licensing, because they've kind of helped us change our guidelines. I mean, my favorite word is pivot. If I was a basketball, since we're talking about sports, if I was a basketball player, I would be really good at pivoting right now, because
no doubt.
we've had to do a lot of that just over the last couple of months. But it's meant a ton. I mean, when I think of just during essential care, we have kids from 23 different schools. And so you can imagine some kids had to be online at a certain time for a certain class. Other kids just had to do online work. Other kids had paper packets. And I'm a little worried about fall, what that's going to look like, because all of the schools have different schedules. Some are on a week,
we
off
all
a week.
Yeah. Well, the community has, stepped up and provided support. You've continued to have anchor donors that have stepped in and helped you guys. I'm sure that there is still a great need. And let's talk a little bit about what's happening now and what you're sensing from the front line. I've been concerned about what we're going to do about caring for our kids with some of the summer programs and summer camps canceling. Talk a little bit about your concerns in terms of meeting the needs.
Well, I just think that there's a lot of learning gaps that have evolved as a result of kids having been home. I mean, think about us only being able to serve a fraction of who we normally serve. And so we were lucky because De La Salle Education Center actually donated their high school to us to open up a second face-to-face opportunity for summer school this summer. So we were actually able to bring in an additional 130 kids to have face-to-face instruction, because that's such a difference maker for kids in terms of being able to really work through. So we looked at what are the gaps they have from the last school year's kind of key standards, and what do we need to do to help fill those gaps before they move on to the next grade level this fall. So that's been a huge focus for us.
Well, Ready to Play Week is about bringing attention to what's happening with our kids on the front line, and certainly no other organization is as close to the front of this battle as Operation Breakthrough. And what a tremendous name for an organization, because it is so critical that our young kids get this development opportunity to engage with material and information and learning, and also activity. I know that you have a great relationship with a world champion tight end that plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's focused on bringing attention to maybe meeting the needs of an older demographic there at Operation Breakthrough, with some big plans for a STEAM facility that would provide an enormous amount of education for the teenage group that has not quite been targeted by Operation Breakthrough up to this point. Talk a little bit about that relationship, what it's meant to have a professional athlete jump in and be a part of your team, and some of the things that you have been impressed about that young man that he's been able to plug into Operation Breakthrough like he has.
Well, he's actually been partnering with us. I'm thinking this will be his 5th year. And it's been great because, he provides he sets a great role model example, but he comes in and sees the kids, and it's not necessarily when the cameras are rolling, but he comes in, he sponsors our robotics program. Last fall, he did a little robotics championship with the kids. In fact, this summer, he even did a Zoom call with the kids during essential care, which was, I can imagine he went through an hour of questions. Each of the kids on the Zoom call got to ask him 3 questions, no holds barred. So that was really interesting. But one of the things he noticed when we did our expansion, and had our Maker City, is he was like, well, what happens to the kids when they turn 14? You're teaching them all these great robotics, STEM, digital media, but what happens then? And he's very sensitive to kind of how critical those high school years are. And so he's actually partnering with us to create a co-working space and kind of workforce development for our kids, so that they age into that as they come out of our earlier program. So we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to help any way we can. We want to bring attention to that program. We want to work with him to try to continue to help raise the funds for that, because we think it's a really great target for our city, and just a great idea. And just like everything Operation Breakthrough seems to do, they look at a problem and they try to come up with a solution, and that's one thing I love about your leadership and about your organization. Looking out over the course of the next 2 to 3 months, what are you most concerned about, and what would what can we do? We're raising money right now to help any kind of emergent needs that might be created by the crisis. Talk a little bit about your fears and concerns about this summer.
Well, obviously, looking at what school's going to look like in the fall, watching kind of the spiking that's going on, we want to make sure we can see as many kids as we can and keep parents working. Both of those are critical needs for families to thrive. You and I had a conversation earlier this summer about how are kids keeping kids active this summer, and I'm super excited to tell you that the Ys have partnered with us, and starting after the 4th, we're going to get to use 2 of the local Ys for swimming every day. And so that's really going to be outside of just being able to go outside a little bit. That's the first real activity kids are going to get, but just think of the normalcy that comes with going back to swimming lessons and some of those things. Because I think that's one of the things we want kids to feel like, is that there's some things that they can really count on. But as we move into fall, we're going to try to juggle and see how many kids can we continue to support when they're in school, or whether they're remote learning, and how do we continue to mitigate those gaps that have occurred for kids that we haven't been able to see because of group or size reduction.
Well, we'll keep watching, keep paying attention, keep bringing attention to the work you're doing. We were able to send, I think, 10 or 15 kids to a sports camp over the holidays. I just talked
Loved
with
it.
I just talked to Hy-Vee Arena last night, and they're interested in possibly offering up some more space in their facility to bring some more kids there. Will Shields has offered his indoor space, 50,000 square feet of indoor space. If we can raise money and really make this ready to play something significant, I hope that we can partner with you, just like the Y, and help provide the funding to get kids keep kids active. That's what Ready to Play is all about.
Well, and I love that.
Yeah. So one last thing, and not to put you on the spot, but I'm sure this experience with COVID has been enough for you, and the pandemic and all the different things, to layer on top of that this whole new awareness around social injustice and the impact that the death of George Floyd has had on our society. I'm sure it's impacted your staff. The people that work down in the heart of the Kansas City metro, and especially your kids. Is there anything special that you've done in your organization to try to bring attention to this and help alleviate some of the fears and anxiety that might be present in the minds of these young people?
Mm-hmm. A couple of things. So one of the things we did early on is we had a forum for staff to just share their own experiences and what they were feeling and thinking. And that was really powerful. I mean, some of the stories that were shared, they were really heart-wrenching and tough to listen to. But we talked about it in the sense of how can we provide more forums for people really share their experiences to increase understanding. And then we talked about within our organization, are there things we need to be doing to make sure that we're providing equity? And then what do we need to do as a voice in the community? How can we collectively help create change in the community? So that's what we've been doing actually as staff. And then what you'll see if you were able to come into the building, but no one is right now, is there've been a lot of conversations in classrooms. And so right now in our school age, over in the Maker City right now, there's posters and there's signs, and particularly telling in one of the classrooms, they did a chart that says, what do I know, what do I want to know, and what questions do I have? One of those charts, and the questions that kids were asking, I mean, kids really want to know, and they were super thoughtful questions, and it was creating a lot of conversation. So I think that we're seeing a lot of conversation, and our middle schools are actually doing some videos. So they went out to the Black Archives and 18th and Vine and some other places in the city, and they're creating videos right now called My City and Me. And so they each are able to kind of personalize it. And so we have a number of kids who are doing their videos on how they feel the city and themselves, where they fit into Black Lives Matter. So a lot going on.
That's going to be great content. I'm excited. Mm-hmm. If we can help promote that and push that out through our social channels, we'd love to. Mary Esselman, Executive Director of Operation Breakthrough. Like everything else, I'm sure you're handling this with a lot of world-class, world-class touch, and making this the right kind of conversations to help move us forward. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the work that you're doing to help serve our community. Families are hurting. Is that right? I mean, families are hurting.
Well, it's been a tough one, and I'm so glad that we have our team of social workers who are, having those touch points every week so we can make sure that families are moving forward and we've got those supports for kids. So, it's being vigilant.
All right. Well, I want to encourage our listeners to look at the Operation Breakthrough website, read all the incredible stories, give to that organization, or give through the Ready to Play Relief Fund. Really thankful for your time today. Thank you for being a part of Ready to Play Week, and hope that we can see each other soon.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me and letting us share.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.